The colony city of Eris Prime sat under a red sky, built across dry plains and tall rock formations. It was a crowded place with metal towers and dusty streets. People lived inside cramped homes made from recycled cargo containers. The colony was always busy with trade ships landing at the port, carrying supplies and travelers from far systems. Eris Prime did not shine like rich planets, but it was full of life and noise. Mark worked in a small repair shop in the lower district. He fixed broken drones, scanners, and damaged shields. His hands moved with calm skill as he repaired a cracked circuit plate. The shop smelled like oil and dust. People from other shops walked past the doors, talking loudly about new troubles and taxes. Mark preferred silence, so he kept his mind focused on his work. A small metal bracelet on his wrist glowed softly each day, but he never told anyone what it was. Inside, Mark was something hidden and ancient. It was a biotech implant called the Aegis system. No one else in the colony knew this secret. It slept inside his body for years, silent and forgotten. Mark never spoke about it and never touched the bracelet that synced with it. He wanted a normal life. He did not want any attention. That peace began to break. In recent weeks, alien raiders known as the Xerath returned to the sector. They were tall and wore sharp armor plates on their bodies. They did not respect colony laws. They stole metals and rare minerals from weak settlements. Sometimes they kidnapped workers to mine for them. Their ships flew low across the desert and scanned cities for resources. Everyone feared them. Still, life in Eris Prime went on. People worked, ate, and slept because they had no choice. Mark did the same. He woke early, walked across the dusty street, and opened his shop. He greeted customers with simple nods and spoke slowly when needed. He was calm but distant, and people liked him for his honesty. One late evening, the sky above the city was dark purple. The streetlights flickered. Mark was sweeping small wire pieces off the floor when the door burst open. A girl with silver hair rushed inside. She looked young and scared. She wore a thin coat and had scratches on her arms. Her breathing was fast, like she had been running for a long time. Mark stared at her, confused. The girl trembled, trying to speak. Outside the shop, heavy footsteps echoed. A large Xerath scout walked across the street, scanning each door with glowing red eyes. People nearby hid inside their homes. The girl looked at Mark with fear. She stepped forward and grabbed his hand without thinking. In that same moment, everything changed. The bracelet on his wrist flashed. A warm wave passed through his arm. The hidden implant woke up inside him like a sleeping giant. A bright blue shield burst from Mark's skin and expanded across the room. It pushed the Xerath scout back out of the door into the street. Sparks flew from the scout's armor as it hit the ground. The people inside the shop gasped. Some stepped back in shock. A tiny drone in the corner recorded everything, blinking green. Mark stared at his glowing hand. His heart raced. The Aegis system had activated for the first time in years. A soft voice echoed inside his head, calm and steady. It called him by name. It listed defensive modes. It scanned for danger. Mark shook, overwhelmed. The girl pulled her hand away and whispered that she was sorry, but she needed help. She said her name was Lena. Her voice was soft, and she spoke with a strange accent. She explained that her species could sense energy patterns. When she touched Mark, she felt the ancient power inside him and triggered it by accident. She warned him that the Xerath would now search for this energy source across the whole district. Mark had never wanted to be noticed, but now everyone in the shop stared at him with wide eyes. Some looked amazed. Others looked worried. A few whispered to each other quietly. Mark felt pressure grow inside his chest. He told Lena to follow him. He pulled her to the back of the shop where stacks of metal crates formed a thin wall between them and the street. Outside, the Xerath scout stood up slowly. Its armor hummed. It scanned again and roared an alarm signal. The red lights on its chest blinked fast. The sound echoed through the street. More Xerath scouts turned toward the repair shop location. Door alarms across nearby buildings activated. People rushed to lock their doors. Mark peeked around a broken panel and saw at least 3 more armored scouts running toward the area. Their boots pounded hard against the metal walkway. Mark felt his implant pulse again. It scanned enemy numbers and made a map inside his mind. He blinked and saw a faint glowing path through the city's side streets. The path showed a safe route away from danger. His vision sharpened. His hearing grew clear. Lena grabbed his sleeve and said they had to run. She knew the Xerath would not stop. They wanted powerful tools of any kind. They would hunt the Aegis system until they had it. Mark hesitated. He looked back at the people in his shop. They held their breath. They trusted him without words, Mark decided. He would not let anyone be hurt because of him. He pushed open a back door behind the shop and pulled Lena through. The ground was dusty and covered with old pipes. Mark followed the glowing path in his vision. It led them down a narrow alley. The air smelled like burnt metal. A group of small children hiding under a metal canopy stared at them silently. Lena placed a finger on her lips, signaling them to stay quiet. They obeyed. Above, 2 drones flew in circles, scanning for heat signatures. When Mark and Lena passed under a damaged water pipe, the cold water splashed and hid their heat from the scanners. Mark felt the implant guide his steps. It was strange but helpful. The glowing path changed with every turn. He could see warnings when danger was near. The implant worked like a guardian. They reached the old subway tunnels at the edge of the district. The area was abandoned, dark and cold. Broken train cars rested on rusted tracks. Metal sheets hung loose from the ceiling. Lena said this was where local resistance fighters sometimes met. She knocked on a faded hatch 3 times. The door opened slightly. A pair of eyes looked out. The man behind the hatch had broad shoulders and short hair. He held a worn rifle. He asked who they were. Lena said they needed a safe place. She whispered that the Xerath were hunting them. The man's face changed from suspicion to concern. He opened the hatch wide and told them to enter. Inside the tunnel, lanterns lit a small group of tired people. They wore old armor pieces and carried rifles. They all looked up when Mark and Lena stepped inside. Lena explained everything quickly. She told them about the implant, the shield, and the glowing energy pulse. The leader's name was Drew. He rubbed his chin and studied Mark. Drew asked Mark to show his power. Mark held up his hand and focused. At first, nothing happened. Then a faint blue shield formed around his fingers like a bubble. Some people stepped back. Others moved closer, whispering excitedly. Drew nodded. He said this power might be exactly what they needed. The Xerath had been tightening their grip on the colony. They blocked trade routes and demanded payments. The colony leaders tried to negotiate, but the Xerath did not listen. They wanted control. Many believed the colony would fall within months. Drew said the resistance was too small to stop them alone, but with Mark on their side, hope returned. Mark listened quietly. He never wanted to be important. He only wanted to fix machines and live in peace. Now peace was fading. He looked at Lena, who watched him with calm eyes. She told him her people believed humans once built technology that responded to emotion. When humans cared for others, the system grew stronger. When they feared hurting innocent lives, it became protective. She believed Mark could use it without abuse. Mark sighed. He knew running would not solve anything. He had seen the fear in the eyes of the children in the alley. He made a decision. He would stand with the resistance to protect the colony. Drew smiled and offered his hand. Mark shook it firmly. Just then, the tunnel lights flickered. A loud thud shook the ground. The Xerath had arrived at the district entrance. Alarm sounds echoed through the city. Distant screams could be heard. Drones scanned the lower streets. The search had begun. Inside the tunnel, people prepared weapons. Drew shouted commands. Lena stood beside Mark and placed her hand on his arm again. The implant flared inside him. The glowing path returned in his vision, showing escape paths and safe spots. Mark breathed deeply. The Aegis system whispered steady instructions in his mind. The peaceful repair shop life was gone. Now the colony stood on the edge of danger. Mark tightened his fists. He would not run anymore. He would protect everyone he could. Eris Prime would not fall, and the stars outside the city walls watched silently as one quiet human began to rise. The old subway tunnel grew louder with every passing minute. Boots echoed from deeper corridors as resistance fighters rushed to set up barricades. Drew lifted a large crate and placed it before an entrance. Other fighters helped by pushing old metal carts and broken train parts into positions that blocked the path. The air was thick with dust and lanterns swung lightly from beams above. Everyone moved with nervous energy. Mark stood near the center of the tunnel, trying to calm his breathing. The glowing path in his vision flickered, adjusting to new threats as Xerath scout signals neared the district. The Aegis system inside him hummed gently as if waking further. Lena stood close to him, watching the entrance. Drew walked over, wiping sweat from his brow. He explained that the Xerath had entered the lower district already. Their drones scanned every street. They were moving in tight formation, searching for one specific energy signature. There was no question who they hunted. Mark understood that every moment here increased danger for the entire resistance. Mark asked Drew why the resistance hid here. Drew replied that these tunnels held old emergency systems, power nodes, and secret escape passages. The Xerath feared them because the layout was complex. The resistance used the dark corners to move unseen. The metal roofs blocked scanning signals. Mark looked around the tunnel. Children huddled against one wall, guarded by women carrying old rifles. They whispered to each other quietly, afraid to make noise. Seeing their fear made Mark's heart tighten. The Aegis system responded to this emotion, and he felt a soft warmth in his chest. A loud clang echoed from the tunnel entrance. Fighters raised their rifles. Drew signaled for silence. Heavy feet marched above, and sparks fell from the ceiling as scanners cut into metal. Lena whispered that the Xerath were making a breach. She felt the vibration of their tools through the rails. Mark placed his palm on the tunnel wall. The implant responded immediately. He felt data pulses through the old wires. The system mapped the layout of the entire sector in his mind. Soft blue lines formed and showed him where to go. Mark told Drew that they must move deeper before the scanners cut through. Drew nodded and ordered everyone to gather. Fighters collected bags of ammunition. Families held on to each other. The group began to move down the track. The tunnel lights dimmed as they walked farther. Lena stayed beside Mark, keeping one hand close to his arm. She said her touch helped the system maintain power. She did not fully understand human biotech, but she sensed a link based on trust. Mark wondered how ancient humans made such a system. He imagined scientists mixing emotion with technology. It felt strange yet powerful. As they walked deeper, the tunnel opened into broader sections with rusty machines and old cargo crates. Drew said this area once stored equipment for train repairs. Now it was a shelter. When everyone was settled, Mark took a moment to sit on an overturned crate. He closed his eyes and let the implant speak to him. The voice inside was calm and neutral. It said his heart rate was stable. It listed energy reserves and shield modes. It scanned for nearby life forms. Mark focused on the map to see where the Xerath forces were moving. They were spreading out, checking every building. Their drones hovered like insects, clicking and buzzing. Suddenly, a high-pitched alarm rang deep in Mark's mind. A red warning flashed. A small group of Xerath scouts had found the repair shop. They were searching through broken tools and containers. They scanned Mark's old work area, looking for more energy traces. Drew frowned when Mark told him. He knew the Xerath would not stop there. They would follow the traces left behind. People around listened quietly and grew tense. Lena looked directly at Mark. She asked him to think clearly. If the Xerath found the tunnel entrance, the group would be trapped. Mark stood up and told Drew that they should move to the older train hub. It lay deeper and had more exits. Drew nodded and agreed. He gave the order for everyone to pack again. While they prepared, footsteps echoed near one entrance. The metal hatch vibrated as something heavy hit it. A fighter named Roy peeked from behind a crate. He whispered that Xerath drones were cutting through the upper door. Sparks showered down and smoke lifted from the edges. The fighters took positions. Drew raised his rifle and aimed at the entrance. Children were rushed behind thick barriers of crates. Mark felt the implant surge. He stepped forward and held his hand up. A blue shield spread across the entrance like a curved glass window. The hatch finally broke and fell forward, landing with a loud crash. 2 Xerath drones flew in, shooting stun nets. The nets hit the shield and bounced off, falling onto the metal floor. More drones entered, buzzing loudly. Behind them, a Xerath officer stepped through. He wore heavy armor and carried a shock baton. He scanned the shield with red lenses. The officer lifted his baton and struck the shield. The blue surface rippled but held firm. Mark felt pressure building in his arm. He clenched his jaw. Lena placed her hands on his back. She whispered that he was not alone. The implant responded again and strengthened the shield. Drew and the fighters used this moment to fire at the drones, knocking several down. The officer realized he could not break through the barrier. He stepped back and signaled for retreat. The drones followed him out. When they were gone, Mark lowered his hand and gasped. His arm felt heavy. The shield faded slowly. Everyone looked at him with awe. A young girl stepped out from behind a crate and thanked him with a shy voice. Mark smiled and nodded. He could not let children be harmed. Drew clapped his shoulder and said he was glad Mark joined their fight. He admired Mark's calm mind under pressure. Mark admitted he did not feel calm, but the implant seemed to guide him. Drew replied that sometimes calm does not mean a quiet heart. Sometimes calm means choosing to stand firm even when afraid. The group moved again, deeper into the old tunnels. They entered a large chamber with cracked pillars and rusted railings. It once served as a central station. Faded maps hung on the walls. Metal benches lay broken. Mark felt the map in his mind update. It showed them 3 potential exits. One led toward the colony center, one toward a water plant, and one toward an old mining tunnel. Drew considered the options. The colony center would be dangerous as Zareth scouts likely blocked roads. The water plant was quieter but had fewer hiding places. The mining tunnel was long but dark and narrow. It could be risky if they were trapped inside. Lena suggested the water plant, saying her senses picked up lower patrol movement there. Before Drew could decide, voices echoed from far behind them. Zareth scouts had found their last hiding place. The resistance fighters prepared rifles. Mark stepped in front again. The implant displayed routes and predicted enemy arrival times. He shared this information with Drew. They moved toward the water plant route. The tunnel narrowed and the air became colder. Drops of water fell from pipes above. The sound of boots behind them grew louder and closer. Mark looked back. He saw shadows moving in the distance. The implant pulsed, warning him that enemy units were closing from 2 directions. Drew ordered fighters to form a defensive line. He pointed to a cross-tunnel and asked a small group to block it with metal crates. Mark stepped to the front again and held up his hand. The blue shield formed, stretching across the entire width of the tunnel. The shield crackled lightly like electricity. The Zareth scouts reached the shield and struck it with their weapons. The barrier rippled but held. Then one scout raised a heavy device and fired a bolt of energy. The shield shook under the impact and Mark staggered back slightly. Lena touched Mark's shoulder. The implant drew energy from his emotional response and reinforced the shield. Fighters fired at the scouts through small gaps in the walls. The Zareth officer barked commands, pushing them forward. The shield glowed brighter. Mark felt sweat on his forehead. His legs shook. The implant warned him that energy was dropping. He needed rest soon. Drew shouted that the path behind them was ready. Mark slowly stepped back, keeping the shield raised until the last person passed through the cross-tunnel. When everyone crossed, Drew and 2 fighters pulled a heavy control lever. Large metal gates slammed shut, blocking the Zareth scouts. Mark dropped the shield and fell to one knee. Lena knelt beside him. She helped him breathe slowly. People whispered thanks. One elderly man bowed. Mark felt shy and looked away. Drew lifted him to his feet. He explained that this was only the beginning. The Zareth would not give up. They were obsessed with powerful technology. They feared human potential. If they captured the Aegis system, they could control many colonies. Mark knew the truth now. He could no longer pretend he was just a repair worker. He would have to stand for something. The implant hummed again, reminding him that his choice mattered. Lena watched him quietly. She saw strength growing behind his tired eyes. As they moved toward the water plant exit, the lights in the tunnel flickered. The ceiling groaned. The distant echoes of Zareth weapons faded slightly, but everyone remained alert. Mark walked at the front with Lena beside him. Drew walked behind, guarding their backs. The path ahead was dark and uncertain, but Mark did not feel alone anymore. The tunnel toward the water plant stretched long and cold. Every few steps, drops of water fell from rusty pipes and echoed through the quiet. Mark walked at the front, holding a small lamp. His vision still showed faint blue lines from the implant. They guided him toward the safest route. Lena followed close behind, watching every corner with careful eyes. Drew walked with the rest of the resistance group and guarded their backs. The group moved slowly because many people were tired. Children stumbled, and parents carried them in their arms. Some older men leaned on metal rods. Drew encouraged them softly, saying they were almost safe. Mark knew that this was not fully true, but he appreciated Drew's voice calming the group. As they moved forward, the tunnel opened into a wider chamber. Large pipes ran along the walls like giant metal snakes. Steam drifted through the room. It was warm here, and the smell of water mixed with dust. Mark looked around cautiously. He could hear faint humming from above. Lena placed her ear to a pipe and listened. She said the water pumps were active. meaning the plant was still running. That meant someone was operating it. They continued deeper and reached a large rusted door marked with an old sign. The words were faded but readable. It pointed toward a service route connected to the water plant. Drew knocked on the metal 3 times. The sound echoed. For a moment there was silence. Then a small hatch opened near the bottom of the door. Eyes looked out. A voice asked who they were. Drew answered softly and explained that the resistance needed temporary shelter. The eyes behind the hatch studied him for a moment. Then the lock clicked and the heavy door opened slowly. A man with a tool belt stepped aside. He had dark hair tied back and an oil-stained shirt. His name was Thomas. He worked as a plant engineer. Thomas guided them inside. The room beyond was clean compared to the tunnels. Machines hummed and clicked. Pipes glowed faintly as hot water passed through them. Workers watched the group carefully. Some were afraid. Others looked relieved. Lena smiled politely, and children relaxed slightly. Thomas said the plant workers had been hiding here when the Xerath entered the district. They locked all doors and used thick metal to reinforce them. The Xerath tried to cut through but gave up after realizing how complex the pipes were. The plant still supplied water to parts of the colony, but the workers feared the enemy might shut it down soon. Drew thanked Thomas and explained Mark's situation. Thomas raised his eyebrows when he heard about the implant. He studied Mark's bracelet with interest. Thomas said he had heard rumors about ancient human technology that could create shields and weapons without external devices. No one believed those stories until now. Mark noticed a set of stairs leading upward. He asked Thomas where they went. Thomas said they led to a maintenance platform above the water tanks. From there, one could see parts of the colony through ventilation slits. Mark asked Lena to follow him up. Drew stayed below to discuss defense with Thomas and the other workers. They climbed the narrow stairs and reached a platform where warm air blew through metal grates. Mark peeked through a slit. He saw the colony streets, but they looked different from above. Smoke rose from some buildings. Xerath soldiers marched in formation, scanning each doorway. Drones hovered near windows. A squad was moving toward the tunnel entrance they had blocked earlier. Mark's implant pulsed. It warned him of new dangers. Mark felt a heavy feeling inside his chest. Eris Prime was his home. He did not want it destroyed. He wished he had fought sooner, but he also knew he did not understand his power before. Lena touched his arm gently and said that guilt was not helpful. What mattered was what he would do now. The implant responded softly to her words. It read his emotions and stabilized his breathing. Soon Drew joined them on the platform. He handed Mark a small transmitter. The Resistance used it to listen to Xerath communication frequencies. They heard deep voices giving commands. One voice stood out. It belonged to a Xerath commander named Zarak. He ordered his troops to search deeper areas and capture the one carrying the energy system. Mark clenched his fist. Drew explained that Zarak had a reputation for cruel tactics. He never showed mercy and wanted tools of power for his own rank. Mark looked back through the slit. He saw the commander in dark armor giving orders. His helmet was shaped like a sharp crest. He walked with confidence, pushing his troops forward. As the night deepened, the group rested on the plant floor. Lena sat near Mark and whispered about her people's beliefs. She said ancient humans once had technology that bonded with the heart. When a human wanted to protect, the system created shields. When they wanted to save, it increased strength. When they cared, it adapted. Mark listened quietly. He wondered how a human heart could be turned into such power. Lena smiled and said hearts were already powerful. The implant simply listened. Mark thought about that for a long moment. Suddenly, booming noises echoed from above. Dust fell from the ceiling. The ground shook. People woke and panicked. Thomas ran to a control panel and checked the monitors. He shouted that Xerath forces were attacking the plant's outer walls. They wanted control of water supplies. Without water, the colony would suffer terribly. Drew ordered fighters to guard all exits. Mark rushed to the stairs and climbed back to the platform. Through the slit, he saw Xerath soldiers firing heavy weapons at the plant wall. Sparks flew from reinforced metal. Pieces of debris fell to the ground. The wall shook again. Mark felt the implant react. It gathered power inside his arm. He climbed down and ran to Drew. He said he needed to go outside. Drew stared at him with concern. He reminded Mark that the enemy had full squads out there. Mark replied that if the plant fell, the colony would fall next. Lena nodded in support. She put her hand on Mark's shoulder. The implant glowed brighter. Drew sighed deeply and agreed. He opened a small maintenance door. It led to a narrow tunnel that exited behind a water pipe outside the plant. Mark stepped inside. Lena followed him. Drew stayed behind to organize defense from within. The door closed softly. Inside the small tunnel, pipes hissed and steam warmed the air. Mark crawled forward until he reached the exit hatch. He opened it slowly. They stood outside behind a large pipe. Rain from the steam created puddles on the ground. The night air smelled like metal. Mark peeked around the pipe. Zareth soldiers fired at the wall. Their weapons glowed red. The plant's outer wall dented under the force. Mark took a deep breath. He stepped out and held up his hand. A bright shield formed around him. The nearest soldiers turned in shock. They fired at the shield, but the beams bounced off. Lena ran behind Mark and shouted instructions. She pointed to weak spots on enemy armor. Mark charged forward. The shield pushed soldiers backward. Their weapons shut down as they hit the ground. The implant reacted to Mark's focus and created a pulse that spread in a wide circle. More soldiers stumbled and collapsed. Suddenly, a heavy blast struck Mark's shield. He fell to one knee. A tall figure stepped forward. It was Commander Zarek. His armor hummed with power. He held a massive energy blade. It glowed blue like Mark's shield, but darker and colder. Zarek spoke in a deep voice, telling Mark to surrender. He said technology like the implant belonged to the strong. Mark shook his head and stood again. Lena placed her hand on his arm. The implant flared with new light. Zarek swung his blade and struck the shield. Sparks flew. The sound echoed through the plant yard. Mark held firm, but each strike pushed him back. His legs shook. Lena shouted encouragement. The implant read her support and strengthened the shield. Mark pushed forward. Finally, Mark gathered his strength and sent a blast of energy from his palm. It hit Zarek's chest. The commander staggered backward, surprised. He dropped his blade for a moment. Other soldiers rushed to his side. Mark lifted his shield again and stepped closer to the plant wall. He created a protective dome around it. Lena helped guide the energy. The dome wrapped over the damaged section like glass. Zarek growled and ordered retreat. He promised he would return with stronger weapons. The Zareth soldiers slowly pulled back. Mark stood still as the dome faded. He collapsed to the ground. Lena caught him. He breathed heavily. The implant warned that his energy was low. Lena smiled softly. She thanked him for protecting the plant. Drew and Thomas ran out to help. They lifted Mark and carried him inside. Workers cheered. Children watched with wide eyes. Hope filled the plant. Later, Mark rested near a warm pipe. Lena sat beside him. Drew thanked him again and said the colony still faced danger, but morale had changed. People now believed they could fight. They believed in Mark. The night grew quiet. Mark closed his eyes. The implant whispered that new challenges were coming. He would need strength and trust for what came next. For now he rested, knowing he had defended more than a building. He had defended the heart of the colony. Mark woke early the next day. He felt the cool metal floor under his boots when he stood. His private system slowly pulsed with a blue glow on his wrist, showing new numbers and new skills. He had gained strength and speed after helping the resistance, and the system seemed to grow stronger with every action. He did not completely understand it, but he knew it was important. Lena stood beside a table in the main room, checking maps and marking locations with red lines. Her bright eyes were serious. She knew time was running short. Drew walked in with a light smile. He was always calm even when danger was near. He placed a cup of warm drink on the table. The smell filled the room. It reminded everyone that even in war, small comforts still mattered. Mark sat across from Lena and looked at the map. There were 3 main Zareth bases, all linked by a main power network. If that network went down, the enemy would lose control. It was a risky plan, but also the fastest path to victory. Lena turned to Mark. She trusted his plan. She had seen how the people followed him. That trust gave her hope. She asked him to explain the plan again, this time to the other officers in the room. Mark pointed at the first base. It controlled communications. The second base controlled shields. The third base held their main energy core. If they could take all 3 sides of the triangle, the Zareth defense would fall. Drew suggested they strike at night when the guards changed shifts. It would give them a window to slip inside, everyone agreed. The plan was clear. They began preparing and selecting the best members for each team. Mark would lead the strike on the second base, Lena would take her squad to the communications center, and Drew would head to the main energy core. They would move at the same time to avoid giving the enemy any chance to respond. When the sun began to set, the resistance moved through hidden tunnels. The air was heavy with dust and metal scent, but they pressed forward. The tunnels were old, but they were safe enough. Mark whispered to his team as they reached the surface. The stars were bright overhead, and a cold wind brushed against their faces. The second base was in the distance, glowing faint blue. Tall metal towers stood like silent guards. They moved slowly across the rocky ground, keeping their heads low. Mark raised his hand to signal everyone to stop. A Xerath patrol walked by, their metallic armor shining. The patrol never saw them, and after a few silent moments, they passed. Mark sighed with relief and motioned the team forward again. Inside the base, they found a large hall full of strange machines. The machines hummed with energy. Mark checked his private system, and it showed glowing symbols. He could see weak points inside the power towers. It was an ability he never had before. He guided the team to those weak points, and they placed energy disruptors. Once activated, the shields around the planet would collapse. While Mark worked on the final disruptor, a loud alarm sounded. His heart pounded inside his chest. Somehow they had been discovered. He shouted for his team to spread out. More Xerath soldiers rushed into the room. Mark used his private system to activate a speed skill. He moved faster than he ever had before. He dodged attacks and struck back with clean, precise blows. His team fought hard. They had trained for this moment. Mark saw a soldier about to attack one of his friends. Without thinking, he sprinted across the room and blocked the shot. The blast hit his armor and almost knocked him down, but he recovered and pushed forward. He felt a sudden surge of power, as if the system inside him wanted to protect everyone around him. Meanwhile, Lena and her squad were deep inside the communication center. She saw tall pillars of bright light that carried signals across the planet. She rushed forward with her squad and placed devices near each pillar. Her hands shook slightly. She wanted everything to go right. When the last device locked in place, she gave the signal. The devices flashed and the pillars shut down. The entire communication network fell silent. At the same time, Drew reached the main energy core. It was a giant structure with swirling blue energy. He watched it pulse with power. 2 guards stood in front of the control panel. Drew whispered to his squad, and they launched a distraction. The guards chased the noise while Drew slipped behind them and unlocked the main panel. He entered a code that the Resistance had stolen weeks ago. With a soft click, the energy core began to overload. Back at Mark's base, the disruptors were ready. Mark slammed his hand on the final switch and the whole room shook. Bright flashes of light burst from the towers outside. The shield protecting the Xerath bases across the planet shattered. Mark smiled, but his relief was short. A large Xerath commander entered the room. He was taller and stronger than the others. His armor glowed with red lines. Mark had heard stories of these elite commanders. They never backed down. The commander charged forward. Mark activated a shield skill from his system. A glowing barrier surrounded him. The commander struck hard, and the impact sent sparks flying, but the barrier held. Mark pushed back with all his strength. His private system flashed warnings. His energy was dropping. He knew he had to finish this quickly. The commander swung again. Mark ducked under the strike and delivered a clean punch to the commander's control suit. Sparks flew and the red lines faded. The commander fell to the floor. When the battle ended, Mark gathered his team. They checked for injuries and prepared for extraction. Outside, the sky was filled with bright streaks of fire. The planetary shield was gone, and the Resistance fleet moved in. Lena radioed Mark. She sounded excited. The communication center was offline. Drew also confirmed the energy core was unstable and about to shut down fully. Everything was going as planned. Mark's private system chimed again. New abilities unlocked. New strength flowed through him. But he also saw a new warning. The Xerath Queen had detected his energy source. She was preparing to send her strongest warriors. Mark knew this was far from over. The Resistance regrouped in a hidden valley. Tents were set up, fires were lit, and wounded soldiers were treated. Mark walked among them, offering comfort. Many soldiers looked at him with new respect. They whispered about the strange glow that appeared when he fought. They believed he was chosen by something greater. Mark tried not to think about it. He only wanted peace. Lena walked beside him. Her voice was soft. She thanked him for saving one of her squad members earlier. Mark felt a warm feeling in his chest when she smiled. Drew joined them with a tired laugh. He told them the next phase would be even harder. The final target was the palace where the Zareth Queen lived. It was heavily guarded, and the Queen had powers that few could understand. Mark's system flashed again. A new option appeared. It showed a power that could counter the Queen's energy, but it required a deep connection with another person. Mark looked at Lena. She felt his stare and raised an eyebrow. She asked if something was wrong. Mark shook his head. He did not want to worry her. But inside, he wondered if their bond was the key to ending the war. Night fell across the valley. The fires crackled and soldiers rested. Mark stared at the stars. He thought of Earth and how far he had come. Lena sat next to him quietly. She placed her hand on his. His private system glowed once more. It showed a message. Connection strength increased. Shared focus unlocked. Mark looked at Lena in surprise. She did not understand the system, but she felt the connection too. Far away, inside a dark chamber, the Zareth Queen stood before a giant screen. She watched the shield fall and the bases fail. She clenched her fists and her eyes glowed bright purple. She ordered her strongest warriors to prepare. She would face the human who carried the strange power. She would not allow her empire to fall. Back in the valley, Mark's system displayed one final message before the night ended. Prepare for final confrontation. Mark breathed slowly. His journey was reaching its peak. Tomorrow would decide everything. He closed his eyes, hoping tomorrow would bring peace, not more pain. The fire beside him burned warm and bright. The resistance prepared for the biggest battle of their lives. Tomorrow they would face the Queen. The sun rose slowly over Eris Prime, painting the sky with pale gold. In the hidden valley, the resistance gathered. Soldiers checked weapons, prepared supplies, and whispered quietly among themselves. Mark stood at the front, his private system glowing softly on his wrist. The implant had grown stronger after the last battle, and he felt its pulse guiding him. Lena stood beside him, calm but focused. She had learned to read the system's subtle signs. Drew walked among the soldiers, giving orders and encouragement. Mark looked at the distant horizon where the Zareth Queen's palace rose. Its sharp towers gleamed like crystals under the morning sun. Energy shields shimmered faintly around the palace walls. Mark could feel the intense power radiating from within. His chest tightened, but he drew in a deep breath. Today would decide the fate of the colony and possibly the entire sector. Drew gathered the leaders and said the plan one final time. 3 groups would attack from different sides. Mark would lead the main strike directly at the palace entrance. Lena would disable communications and alarms. Another team would cut off reinforcements from nearby watchtowers. Everyone nodded. There was tension but also determination. Mark knew that their survival depended on unity and trust. The resistance began moving through the hidden paths. The terrain was rocky with small cliffs and narrow canyons. The palace appeared closer with every step. Mark could see guards patrolling the walls. Drones hovered overhead. Each movement of the enemy sent vibrations through the ground. Mark's system highlighted weak points, paths that avoided patrols and positions where his team could strike first. He whispered instructions to his squad as they advanced. Lena took her team to the side of the palace, moving quietly. She used the shadows and rocks for cover. When they reached the communications tower, she set small devices on control panels. The devices sent pulses that disrupted enemy signals. The blinking lights went out and the drones began to lose connection. Lena smiled softly. Mark could feel the effect of her actions through their shared system connection. The bond between them made the system stronger. Every pulse, every action was amplified. At the main entrance, Mark's team approached. Guards stood in lines, armored and armed with energy weapons. Mark raised his hand. A soft blue shield formed around him. His squad followed cautiously. The shield pulsed with energy, and the guards stopped, surprised by its intensity. Mark's private system analyzed the enemy movements and suggested a synchronized attack. He nodded to his team, and they moved in perfect coordination. Mark struck first. His shield expanded and sent a shockwave forward. Guards stumbled back, their weapons sparking as the shield absorbed the blasts. Mark moved faster than anyone could follow, his private system guiding every step. He blocked attacks, dodged blows, and countered with precise strikes. The squad followed his lead, moving through the palace gates without hesitation. Deep inside the palace, the Zareth Queen waited. Her eyes glowed purple, filled with power and anger. She had seen the resistance advancing on her sensors. Her voice echoed across the chamber as she summoned elite warriors to her side. She held a crystal staff that pulsed with energy. When she stepped forward, the walls themselves seemed to vibrate. Her presence was overwhelming. Every step she took sent waves of energy through the palace floors. Mark felt the change immediately. His system warned him of a new level of threat. He took a deep breath. Lena's hand rested lightly on his arm. The connection between them strengthened the shield around him. He could feel her courage. He could feel the resistance's hope. All of it flowed through him, and the Aegis system responded. The glow of his implant intensified. The Queen's warriors rushed toward Mark. Their weapons hummed with deadly energy. Mark lifted his hand, activating a defensive dome. Blasts struck the barrier, sending sparks and light into the room. Mark moved with precision, shielding his team while using pulses to push back enemies. Lena guided him, calling out weak points in enemy armor. Every motion they made was synchronized, the system linking their focus and emotions. The Queen stepped forward, her staff glowing brighter. She struck the ground, and energy waves spread in a circle. Mark's system reacted instantly. He raised a shield that covered his squad and reflected the blast back toward the warriors. The Queen's eyes narrowed. She was powerful, but Mark could feel her energy through the implant. He knew he could counter it if he focused completely. Mark advanced carefully, watching for the Queen's attacks. She swung her staff with incredible speed. Each strike carried energy capable of crushing metal walls. Mark blocked, ducked, and moved with a grace he had never known before. Lena whispered guidance. "Focus on her energy rhythm," she said. "Match her pace, don't fight blindly." Mark understood. He began to sense the pattern, the flow of her power. His own system synchronized, creating a perfect balance between offense and defense. The Queen growled and unleashed a massive energy wave. Mark raised his shield and pushed forward. The pulse hit him, and for a moment he felt the force trying to push him back. He held firm. The system responded to his will, strengthening the shield. He pushed again forward, forcing the energy back toward the Queen. Her staff glowed brighter, and she tried to break through. Mark felt every pulse, every strike, every wave. The bond with Lena and the system was stronger than anything he had ever felt. Then he saw an opening. The Queen's energy flared unevenly for a split second. Mark focused all his strength, concentrating on the blue light in his palm. He stepped forward, moving faster than the eye could see, and struck the staff with a precise blow. Sparks flew and the staff cracked. The Queen's shield faltered. Mark did not hesitate. He delivered another strike, synchronized with Lena's guidance. The Queen staggered. Her warriors saw the fall of her energy shield and hesitated. Mark's squad pressed forward. The Queen tried to attack again, but the rhythm had shifted. Mark's shield, powered by his emotion and Lena's connection, was unstoppable. With one final pulse, Mark released all his energy. The force radiated outward, sending the Queen and her elite warriors backward. The crystal staff shattered and the purple glow dimmed. Silence fell across the chamber. The Queen lay on the ground, defeated but alive. Mark lowered his shield slowly, breathing heavily. Lena ran forward and helped him stand upright. Drew and the rest of the squad entered, cheering softly. Soldiers from the resistance appeared from hidden entrances. The palace was under control. The battle was over. Mark's private system pulsed one last time. It displayed a message: mission complete. Energy balance stabilized. Mark felt a wave of relief. The system had grown stronger, but it had also taught him restraint. The power was not for dominance, but for protection. He understood now that true strength came from courage, unity, and the will to defend others. The Queen looked at Mark and Lena. Her eyes were no longer filled with anger, but with recognition. She nodded slowly, understanding that humanity's potential was extraordinary. She spoke in a soft voice. "You are the one who awakened the true power. You have shown wisdom and strength beyond measure." Mark nodded, unsure of what to say. He had only acted to protect his home. The resistance gathered in the central hall. Soldiers celebrated quietly. Children smiled and families hugged each other. Lena stood beside Mark, her hand lightly resting on his arm. He looked around at the faces of those who had fought and survived. He realized that every small act of courage had mattered. Every choice to protect, every risk taken had brought them here. Humanity had faced a challenge from a powerful enemy and had risen stronger. Drew came forward and clapped Mark on the shoulder. "You did it," he said. "Not just you, all of us. But your power led the way. Mark smiled faintly. He felt exhausted but fulfilled. Lena nodded. "The colony is safe now," she said softly. "Thanks to you." The sun set that evening, casting golden light over the palace and valley. Mark and Lena stood on a balcony watching the stars. The planet was quiet now, at peace for the first time in many months. The resistance had won, but more importantly, hope had returned. Mark's private system pulsed gently on his wrist, no longer urgent but calm. He knew it would continue to guide him, but he also understood that true strength came from the choices he made, not the system alone. Mark looked at Lena. She smiled. "We did it together," she said. He nodded. Drew joined them, looking at the horizon. "Humanity has shown what it can do," he said. "Not just technology, but courage, heart, and unity. We have won because we fought as one." The colony slowly rebuilt over the following weeks. Trade resumed, homes were repaired, and children laughed in the streets again. Mark returned to his small repair shop, though now it was more than a simple place. It became a symbol of hope. Lena stayed nearby, helping the colony organize defenses in case of future threats. The resistance remained vigilant, but they also knew that the galaxy had seen the strength of humans, and respect had grown for their people,